Hello and welcome, Exiles, to look at my Ethereal Knives Saboteur Keystone Stacker. Now, I'm going to go ahead and start off with doing a showcase of a Uber Cortex, which has a little bit of mixing of mapping content along with a bit of bossing to give you a lay of the land. Map mods we have are Shock, which is fine. We're Shock immune, Monster Onslaught, so this is relatively easy a map, and I have my filter set to basically like my really non-strict one because I started doing a hardcore run in Sushi's private league. This will probably be maybe one of our last characters of the league until we start going into Gauntlet. But the idea behind this character was I wanted to use as many of the new exceptional support gems as possible. One of the new ones being a support called Machinations, which gives you gain Fizz as extra chaos per keystone. So the idea was I could get a bunch of keystones on this character, and then using those extra keystones would give me a gain Fizz's extra chaos. And my thought process is I was going to combine that with Unholy Trinity, which you'll notice the Trinity up here is a darker version, darker variant, which I'm going to go over those two support gems and how they work and what the mechanics are. There's a few other things we've used in the build, but those are some of the primary things. Try to get through this boss fight without dying, hopefully. Tank that because I wasn't paying attention to what the mechanic they were doing was. But anyways, we are also using overloaded intensity, and I did have to have one non-exceptional support. I technically have an Empower, which is an exceptional. Isn't a new one, but I was trying to get as many exceptional supports into a skill as I could reasonably do, and those are the ones I got away with. If I had Imbued Pinpoint, we could probably maybe try to fit one more, but the Imbue for Pinpoint was apparently over 100 Divines, and I decided, you know what, I don't want to put that much into one skill gem. It seems a little bit crazy. I'll just use Pinpoint, the regular support. And I just went for Imbue Pierce because that was just a decent one that was a lot cheaper for me. The other things we're mixing in with this, we're doing Sands of Time with trigger bots. If you haven't seen by now, it's basically I want to say it's like the caster version of the Savior Sword. It gives you basically some clones of yourself casting the ability you activate. It specifically works really well with trigger bots because you get twice the procs essentially, and you avoid the normal cap of 3 to go to 4 with 2 casts. So it's quite good when used with the Saboteur Ascendancy. We're also combining with Saboteur for the return proj, which means 50% of the EKs I shoot out will return, so you'll see some of those returning can get you a double hit. EK, in my opinion, is one of the... It's not like bottom of the barrel in terms of like there are skills that just have it really bad. EK is like somewhere in the middle to bottom middle in terms of like scalability. It's a little bit on the rougher end. But if you get return proj in there, it starts to help it out a bit and make it work somewhat. And Saboteur does give access to that return proj. So let's go ahead and talk about some of the setup for this character. I wanted to do this support, which I was talking about earlier, Machinations, gain Fizz based on an allocated keystone. You'll notice on my tree, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 keystones. So it's giving me almost 90% gain physical chaos, which you could either take this 2 routes. You could take this where you go Overwhelming Malice and you convert fully to chaos, and then you have Wither, or you could combine it with Unholy Trinity. So my character, when I deal almost equal parts chaos and physical damage, means we have very good uptime on this Unholy Trinity, which gives ignore Fizz reduction, bypass chaos res, and I believe it's around 40% more damage with the level 6 version of it we have here. So that was kind of the idea, was building around some of these keystones. And then as for solving for the Machination downside, which Machination says you get 10% increased cost per keystone, to solve for that, I paired with a low life build using Eternal Youth and Blood Magic, which gives you this really high life per second recharge. Our skill costs 200, and I'm casting over 5 times a second. So I have a 1200 cost per second. And if I was playing a mana build, it would be 1200 mana. And you could solve that, I guess, technically by using a Whisper's Amulet, but that would still be a pretty expensive life per second where you'd notice your ES going down type of thing. You would need like instant leech and stuff to overcome it. But we decided to go with a Eternal Youth Blood Magic combination. And you might be wondering, Lance, how are you not dying to chaos damage bypassing your ES? One of the new Foulborn items, Foulborn Ash's Visage, gives chaos damage taken does not bypass while not on low mana. So if you're a blood magic build and you have 0 out of 0 mana, you are neither full mana nor low mana. You're not ticked for any of those. I'm pretty sure. So this would qualify as not on low mana. It might qualify for full mana. I don't think it does though, but it doesn't qualify for low mana. Therefore, chaos damage has to go through our ES first, and that's how we are solving the bypass damage. There's also a second Foulborn mod. You can get damage reflect immunity. Kind of just nice if you can tag it in, because it means, hey, you can run more maps without really thinking about it if you can run reflect immune. So that's kind of one of the upsides there. Another thing I want to talk about is we are playing EK. And EK, it has a certain proj speed you have to get to before your projectiles can even effectively return. So for example, right now I have a bunch of proj speed clusters all over my character. If I didn't have these, you'll notice like right now you can see projectiles are returning. They're getting back and you can get some double hits. However, if I were to go and start taking off these proj speed clusters and get rid of some of this proj speed, well, there's still some returning. Let's take a couple more off. And the consistency will go down, mind you. So we'll take off another one and you'll notice, okay, there's some things that have returned, but then maybe they were hitting a wall or an object. Because what will happen is the EK will go and hit a wall, and it'll say, oh, I have still more distance travel to go. I'll start returning. But if there is no wall, it will just fade out. And the way you get around this is you need roughly around 150 proj speed with Vengeance Cascade, or like 200 plus without Vengeance Cascade. So I'm using Vengeance Cascade on my Anoint and combining it with this. Shout out to Arrow. I was doing some testing with this. I tried 120 and it didn't feel like it worked with 120 Vengeance Cascade. He said at 150 it started working, so I pumped a little bit more proj speed and it was starting to work. So shout out to Arrow, who is also working on a really cool EK build. He was doing a battle mage setup, and I think he's going to be posting a video on that. I don't know. He may have already posted a video on that. I don't know. It looked like a pretty solid setup, to be honest. But that is how you can get EK to return. It has to go to a certain distance, and you need a certain amount of proj speed to get it to go that distance to then return to get that extra hit. One thing about this keystone stacking I'm doing, some of these keystones are useful. For example, Eternal Youth, that is our life sustain. Zealot's Oath, that's our ES sustain. Caspro means we can tattoo all over the place and get a bunch of advantage from tattoos. Whereas something like this node over here, Call to Arms, this is a keystone that doesn't do anything good for our build, but doesn't do anything bad. So there's a couple of keystones like that. Arsenal of Vengeance we picked up. Part of the reason why I traveled over here is because there's just a boatload of keystones. They don't do anything bad for our build, and they just give us the gain 10% Physis extra chaos. For example, if I clicked Avatar of Fire, this would effectively brick my character because it would delete half my damage and force it all to be fire. This would not be good to click. So that's why we're clicking that. For example, Necromantic Aegis, if my bypass protection got given to my minions, that would make me instantly die to chaos. So you don't want to pick up certain keystones that have brick downsides, but we have a lot of keystones that have fairly good upsides for the build and a few keystones that don't do anything negative. So that's how it's working with Machinations, and that combines really well with Unholy Trinity. Shout out Unholy Trinity for a lightning skill is also just peak, because if you just have a tiny amount of conversion on a lightning skill, which have huge ranges, I think guy in my chat said he only had 6% conversion from a Blue Nightmare or something, and that was still enough for him to activate Unholy Trinity. Granted, he had a character that hit 25 times a second, so you're going to need more conversion if you don't hit as fast as that. But the thing is, lightning skill range with this thing is phenomenal because it gives you basically full Elirez bypass or ignore on top of the more damage multiplier. So very, very strong synergy there. After all of that, we also went for Overloaded Intensity, which I got to give some flowers. Overloaded Intensity, I didn't initially, when I read this gem, I was like, oh, is that going to be annoying to keep up? And I don't know. At one point, somebody made a post about what are the best exceptional support gems on Reddit? And I read the post and people were throwing out their suggestions. And one guy was like, yo, Overloaded Intensity is insane. All you need is Nadir support. And I was like, that's interesting. Is it really that easy? And yeah, it's literally that easy. If you have this gem right here, Nadir mode, lose intensity once every 0.5 seconds, all you have to do is just cast like you normally would cast, and you'll see this up here. That is the Overloaded Intensity stacks. It just builds up naturally, and this can happen while you're mapping, while you're doing whatever. You don't have to think about it. There's no actual stuff you have to do on your end to guarantee this is actually working. All you need is this thing right here, and you're going to be at max Overload Intensity stacks, and max Overload Intensity also works with the plus crit support gem. So for example, this thing right now is giving close to 6 base crit and 180 crit multi. It's effectively like 2.5 crit support gems all shoved into one gem, which is honestly insane. So that post, shout out to the guy who mentioned overloaded intensity. This is if you take off the +3 just to show the difference that it does in the levels. But this thing's insane. Any skill that can stack intensity should be going crit scaling with this. It's just a crazy strong support gem. Massive shout out to that. So yeah, that was the idea. I wanted to build around a lot of exceptional support gems. And then on top of that, we went for a throwback to old reliable Mageblood. And this is the part where I'm going to say Shrine Belt. I like the Shrine Belt. I think the Shrine Belt is a lot of fun. However, I think Mageblood is still the GOAT. And what I mean by that is Shrine Belt, outside of the incredibly rare 2 really good Shrine Belts, like where they have 2 good useful nodes, I think Mageblood is still probably the best belt in the game, if that makes sense. Like if you have Resistance plus Excel, which that occurred like once this entire league so far, which is just jackpot, mega billionaire jackpot type of rarity. It doesn't really exist. It's not real. Mageblood, I think it still offers too much to be picked lower than a Shrine Belt, if that makes sense. I like Shrine Belt for a lot of builds, but Mageblood just solves a lot of things. It solves speed, it lets you go for max res, lets you go for those sorts of things. And for us, that gave us a lot of crit scaling. It gave us permanent onslaught, movement speed, and it helped us get 90 max all res. So I have to give props to the belt that I still think is the king. I was predicting Shrine would completely overthrow it with how rare they made the 2 good mod belts. I have to say that's in a next level tier. When you're talking about multiple mirrors for one item, that's insanity. It's hilarious to me that this belt at like 150D price tag is quote unquote the budget belt by comparison. It's just a weird situation. But anyways, yeah, I wanted to try out the old Mageblood because I've been doing quite a few builds with Shrine Belts over this league, and yeah, it's still very good. Sands of Time, just to showcase what's happening here. You cast once, 2 mirages that are going to cast for you. You cast again. There's another 2 that spawn, and you get 4 extra casts. There's a bit of a lower damage on them. I think they have like 20% less damage or something on the trigger or whatever. But there's still a very effective amount of damage, especially combined with trigger bots. So the main thing we're building around, Return Proj Shrapnel Specialist, Perfect Crime Trigger Bots, and then Born in Shadows for DR. That pairs very well for some extra defenses. One of the biggest weaknesses we have in this character is our Fizz defense. We have a little bit of Flesh and Stone, but largely we do not have a lot of Fizz mitigation, so that helps out with that. We are also automating our Righteous Fire, which one thing I should note is Righteous Fire, if you have it on your automation support, this is a weird thing I found out while playing this character, is if you level up the automation gem, it'll brick your Righteous Fire for the rest of the run where it will look like this instead of a normal animation, which I don't know. I think I swapped something in and out that turned off the RF, but it's one of those things where it's going to be bugged until you zone change. So just a caution when using automation if you're still leveling it before you swap out for Righteous Fire. That was going on there. So yeah, anyways, that is the EK Saboteur Keystone Stacker. Probably one of the last builds I'm going to do this league, at least in terms of softcore trade. I'm going to start working towards making some plans for Gauntlet because I really want to play that. I believe Ziz announced that today. I have not watched the announcement, and I've had a lot of fun the last Gauntlet event, so I'll probably try to make a build planning for that, seeing what we can do as a softcore Andy playing a hardcore event. So yeah, anyways, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video on the character. POV will be in the description. As always, thanks for watching, Exiles. Take care and peace out. Have a good one.